what is the novelty this project is bringing?
The novelty is mostly to have a two-factor authentication for transactions that have to be really secured. So in biometrics is now an old technology, it's almost 40 years old, right? But biometrics initially was something that was very specialized. Now it's a technology that everyone can bring at home, and it's quite secure because there are two factors, right? So here the two factors are voice, and voice, even though it's variable, is something that is very different from one person to the other.
And it is unique for a person? I mean, there are two persons.
It is unique, yes, it's really unique, even though there is some variability. So if today you have this certain voice, tomorrow it's going to change a little bit, and so it has to be tested thoroughly in order to understand how it works. And here the novelty for voice is that it mixes up speech recognition and speaker recognition. So speaker recognition is about knowing who a person is, while speech recognition is about saying, he's saying so-and-so, right? Here you have to say a prompted text. So you recognize a speech so that the person cannot repeat the same thing over and over again. It has to be what he reads, right? Or she reads, actually. Okay? And about face, the novelty is really that the technology has been evolving a lot during the past 5 years. Now, the whole technology of face, which you probably have heard a lot, there is a lot of experiments in China that sometimes are criticized, but it relies on neural networks, and it's extremely powerful. So basically, the difference is that you will get the whole thing through learning. There is no modelization. It's completely from images that you are going to get all the expression and variability and makeup and facial hair and tiredness and tan when you go on holiday. And the machine itself will have the resource to learn from it. There will be no modeling, nothing that comes in between the learning set and the machine. So it's much more powerful than it used to be.
But what about the following situation? I am a registered user. Yes, the system already knows me. But I do a surgery, a plastic surgery. So I change my face. I do some, I don't know, Botox and so on. What about the recognition? It's still recognizing me as being myself?
So I know about an example that comes from Korea, actually. So it's a lady who had huge face surgery, right? So she has her jaw completely reduced and her nose done again. Eyes were the same and mouth was the same. And it was enough for the system to recognize it. So yes, the score is lower. So you may need at some point in time to be willing to do some recording, because with aging and with a lot of factors, it may endanger things. But you can always re-record your face if there is a change, and voice all the same, by the way. So you can do a new recording if it's necessary, but it will be robust to a lot of changes, actually. But by the way, sometimes makeup is harder to recognize than plastic surgery.
What about if we wear a mask?
With a mask, it's not going to work, right? If you are hiding your face, it would be not normal that it doesn't work. So it should be robust to mask. Now, if you do the mask of your colleague, okay, so imagine that you have a colleague, you want to borrow his face, and you make a mask of his face. First, it's not so easy. We do that in my company. It's quite difficult to get very good mask. Now, if you have a very good mask, your voice, you will still be your voice. And because we have this fusion of biometrics, you would need at the same time to borrow his voice, which is not so easy because the recording will not be good enough as he has to say a prompted text. So that's the reason why it's quite robust. And in case you really want something extremely robust, we will also fuse with a secure element. So it's like a chip in your credit card. It has cryptographic technology in it, and we will use it on top of the biometrics for extremely secure applications. So yes, we do believe that it's going to be a very robust biometric.
So this is one very important point, that authentication works if you do simultaneously face, voice, and reading the numbers the
Yes.
system is providing you
Yes.
in order to access.
And it's the first time, as far as I know, that there is a version in Romanian.
Okay, Romanian and Greek, if I understand well.
Yes, and Greek. Yes, and it was built from a company that is called Voistress, so they have a specific learning process. And the way it works is that they work with telco companies, and those companies have operators for maintenance or whatever, and they would record their voice in the specific language they have to learn. So this is a repeatable process that could be for I don't know, for Finnish or for whatever language. So one of the goals of the project also was to prove that this learning process of a new language is feasible, and it seems to work quite well.
It's very obvious that this system has to be used, or it is designated to be used in places where the access should be very, very controlled. So financial transactions, banks, medical data maybe. What
Yes.
other applications do you see?
So here we came from 3 use cases that are quite interesting. The first one is here in IFIN. It's about the access control to the data of the institute. So the institute owns quite secret data, right? And it has to be protected so that only authorized people could look at the internet site. And also, it will be applied to access control to physical location. So this is the first application that's really data that has to be protected and physical access control. Our second use case is from a Greek company, so it's a telco and pay TV company. So that's really about broad internet access to pay services. So you want to make sure that your pay TV account is used by you or maybe your relatives, but not by anybody else. So that's another use case. And our third use case is also about protected data, that's medical data, so it's in Crete. And the goal of the system is to have the physical records and communication between patient and medical staff handled through these protected channels. So that's most of the application we can think of top, of course, of financial institution. For finance, it's going to become mandatory, so there is a new regulation in Europe that you need 2-factor authentication for any financial transaction. So it's quite important that such technology could be available.
Okay, the last issue. Can we imagine, let's say, an ideal security access system, to say so? So combining, will we have to combine these biometric techniques with maybe older techniques in order to have a product which is 100% secure?
Biometric will never be 100%. So take fingerprints. I started my career years ago on fingerprints. And at that time, we were aiming at 90% accuracy. Now we are at 99.9. I don't know, maybe it's 8 or 9 in between, after. However, we will never reach 100% because it's statistical. So we will reduce it, but we will never come to exactly 100%. I don't believe we will come very close to it. So what is really precise is what you own or what you know. However, you can lose it, while the biometrics, you cannot lose it. So the idea of having a secure element plus biometric is to get a fusion that is really, really robust, and at the same time, with the biometric, when you lose your secure element or your password, you can still cope. So that's the goal of it.
And any limitations, maybe ethical?
There is clearly an ethical limitation. It's an important part of the project to understand what are the limitations and how this kind of data could be handled. So as a technology provider, we have been working on a DPIA. So DPIA is personal impact assessment, right? I don't remember what the D stands for, but okay, that's not important. And we describe the technology. What the end users are currently doing is taking in charge the role of the controller that would put that in place and see how a financial institution and a hospital are going to cope with it. So today we are at the experimental level. However, in order to have it working really, we need the consent of people. We know for experience that many people would accept it without any problem, but there will still be a marginal number of people, but we don't know exactly how much. Usually with fingerprints, we have 2-3%, that's the experience of my company, who will never accept to have their biometric data taken. So for those people, we will need to have other means, like passwords and secure elements or whatever, and this could cause vulnerabilities in the system. And yes, it's a challenge, but at the same time, it's a legal challenge and a technological challenge. You will never force anyone to use their biometrics.